Good morning. I like that pep. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Bangor. My name is Reverend Drew Moeller and I use he, him pronouns. I want to invite all of you who are joining us today in person and also all those who are joining us today on Zoom. We are glad that you are here. Happy Memorial Day, especially to families and loved ones and people who have served in our armed services. We want to offer a special hearty welcome to you today. Before we get started on our service, I want to welcome Phyllis Havens, who is our worship associate today, to come forward and offer some announcements.
And we are at that time of year where things are starting to wind down a little bit, but there are still plenty of activities happening. We have the first announcement that I make is a call out there. If you haven't already noted or heard about this, General Assembly starts the third week of June, and it's completely virtual this year, and we need one or more delegates from the UUSB to volunteer to join in to the business meetings where a lot of the Article 2 and the 8th principle involvement and everything will be discussed and eventually voted on. So if there's anybody who really would love to take a little bit of time in that third week and act as a UUSB general delegate, that would be lovely. And I guess you could let either Sue McKay, Chair of Council, or Reverend Drew, or both of them, know that. The second thing is the first weekend, actually it's the first Sunday in June, is our annual spring cleanup and garden planting. That's also talked about in your order of service printout. We have the benefit this year because of the Food and Medicine and Needlepoint Sanctuary creations of the standing garden beds that they're going to be doing some planting that day as well. And I know we have all appreciated the amazing work that Ann Perkins usually does with plantings and gardenings around the building. This one is just a general cleanup of any leaves, mowing, raking, whatever needs to be done. I don't know whether we're going to be having any major cleanup inside as well, but we can find out about that. And the third one is just if you pay attention again to the announcement printout, Drew is going to be doing his annual question box service on June 16th. And, you know, I mean, he kind of needs questions. So is that the box that's in the entry?
Oh, someone was working on it. It's possible that somebody made a box, yes.
Okay, there should be a box, and if not, I suppose you could put your question in by email to Reverend Drew, or maybe even put it in your mailbox downstairs. If you have a question regarding anything, it could be UU history, it could be this building, it could be faith and practice questions. He welcomes all and everything, and he'll try his best to answer them. And I think because it's a holiday weekend and we're a small group, yes, excuse me? Oh, drumming today. Oh, yes, I'm out of the loop. I forgot that we're drumming today. We're drumming today after the service, should anybody care to join us at 11:30. Thank you. All right. And now we will turn it over, I will turn it back over to Reverend Drew.
I also want to let people know that you may have noticed this morning something different. Literally, as you were walking in the door is finally finished. I guess the last little bits hooking up the electrical components to make the door open by by pushing a button and stuff like that will be done next week. But it is great that we have the new door in, and most of the funds that were used for that project were from the Boothbys, and so Paul Boothby is with us today. So I want to just recognize Paul, and we are planning We are planning on June 9th to do a door dedication right after the service. So plan on hanging out for a few extra minutes before you grab your coffee so we can bless the door and the opening into the future of UUSB. So with that, I invite everyone to just take a moment to take a couple deep breaths, come into the space that you are in now, whether you're at home online or whether you're here in the sanctuary. Feel the sensations of the body, the warmth, the humidity, the spirit of energy that flows among us and between us. And know that each and every one of you is welcome here, just as you are.
I need to say that I love the introit Molly gave us last week, the one that's in your program as being repeated. And much as I love that song, I'm going to do something a little bit more sweet. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of rain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till selfish gain no longer stain the banner of the free. Oh, beautiful for pilgrim feet, whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom be across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law.
Lighting our chalice this morning, we welcome Ali Kavari. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all her people one. Blessed be. Now, if you'll stand as you're willing and able and join in our opening hymn, number 162, Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield.
Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down gonna study war no more. Ain't 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 gonna study war no more. I'm gonna shake hands around the world, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna shake hands around the world, sorry, everywhere I roam, and study war no more. Ain't gonna 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 study war no more.
So I'm not seeing any younger people right now, so I'm going to, and I've been having some technical difficulties with my script this morning, so I am going to offer the time for all ages from the pulpit. And the story is a little bit more adult in the length. It's a little bit longer story than normal, but it feels like it's a very appropriate and fitting story for today. So today I want to tell you a story about a girl who became a woman whose name was Clara. When she was only 5 years old, she had already learned to ride a horse, and she loved to read and spell and do arithmetic. She was very bright. Clara lived with her family on a farm in North Oxford, Massachusetts. Every day, Clara's family would drive 5 miles in a horse-drawn carriage to the Universalist Church, a church that her father helped build. Clara never forgot the Universalist teachings that she learned there. She learned that God is love and that all lives are precious, gifts that should not be destroyed. When her family was not with her, Clara was painfully shy. She worried about her parents. So the parents decided that they wanted to open her up a little bit, so they sent her away to a boarding school when she was 9 years old. They thought that sending her away would help her make new friends and have larger connections with people, but it didn't work out that way. She became homesick, and finally her parents decided it was wise to bring her home. When she was 11, her brother David fell from the top of their brand new barn and was badly hurt. The doctor said that he might die. "Please," Clara begged the doctor, "please let me be David's nurse. I will take good care of him." So between the parents and the doctor, they decided that it would be a nice thing, a wise thing to give Clara the opportunity to take care of her brother. And so she did. For 2 years, she fed him, gave him medicine, changed his bed. She did all the jobs that a nurse would do for 2 whole years. When she was 17, she took her first job outside of the home. She taught a class of 40 students that ranged in age from 4 years old to 13 years old, which is quite a span. And she did that all in a single-room schoolhouse. She heard that the boys in the school liked to make trouble for the teacher. So, on the first day of class, she offered to play baseball with them. They were surprised that she could throw the ball as hard as any of them, and she could run as fast as any of the boys. So she earned their respect almost immediately. A few years later, a friend asked Clara to come and start a public school. There were some people who were opposed to public schools back there. They didn't think everybody should have a chance at education. But Clara decided that she would take the job, even though it meant that she had to agree to teach for the first 3 years without any compensation. The board did give the building to an old building for them to use, and she started out with 6 students, and very shortly thereafter had over 600 students attending the school. Clara was living and working at the time in Washington, D.C., at the time that the Civil War broke out. She saw soldiers who were coming home from war and were hungry and needed clothes and bandages for their wounds. The government was not able to help many of the soldiers. Clara saw what they needed, and she used her own money to buy food and clothes for the soldiers. She wrote to the newspapers and asked them to tell people what the soldiers needed, and told them what the soldiers needed, and people gave blankets and medicines and other supplies. Later on, the news came from the battlefields that medicine and food were not reaching the soldiers. Often soldiers lay on the ground for days without food or water. Many died of thirst or cold because there was nobody to take them to the army hospitals. There were no nurses to help. In those days, people thought that women were not strong enough to take care of soldiers or be in the middle of war. But Clara knew that that was not satisfactory, and she wanted to do something that they thought no other woman could do. She asked for permission to go to the front lines of battle. Finally, after asking many, 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 many times, she took a wagon full of supplies, pulled by 4 mules, and she went to a battlefield in Virginia. The army doctor who was in charge was very tired and had completely run out of supplies. When Clara showed up, she immediately jumped to work, cooking and caring for the wounded right away. She even learned how to take bullets out of wounded soldiers with a penknife. Later on, the army surgeon that she met said, "If heaven ever sent out a holy angel, she must be this one." After that, Clara was known as the angel of the battlefield. For 14 battles, Clara brought supplies and took care of wounded soldiers on both sides. She nursed everybody who needed help because she still believed in what she had learned in her Universalist church when she was a child, that every life was precious. She said, "I have no enemies." When the war ended, 80,000 soldiers were missing in the Union armies. Every day, Clara would hear from women and children who wanted to find their loved ones. President Abraham Lincoln asked Clara to come to the White House and help him work on this problem of reconnecting families. 2 weeks later, President Lincoln was shot and killed. Clara, working by herself again with the money that President Lincoln had given her and some of her own money, she set up an office. She asked prisoners who had been released and other soldiers who had been out in the war what had happened and if they had seen any of the missing people. She wrote down what people told her and kept books of information that she could use to research when families came to her. Soon she ran out of money and she needed to raise more. Back in those days, there were no TV or radio radiothons that she could do to raise money. So she set out on a speaking tour and gave lectures about what she had learned and seen in the war. It was hard for Clara to speak in front of hundreds of people. Still, she was painfully, painfully shy. She is quoted as saying, "I would rather stand on a battlefield than speak at a public meeting." I'm guessing there's some people who feel that way today. But the crowds were big that came to hear her, and she was able to raise a fair amount of money. But after 2 years of speaking and not being used to doing that, she significantly hurt her voice, and she was no longer to really speak publicly. Her doctor suggested that she go to Europe for rest, and so she went to Geneva, Switzerland. There, Clara learned about an organization that had been formed called the International Red Cross. This organization was started to help wounded soldiers no matter whose side they were on. Clara came back to the United States and talked to the American lawmakers and asked them to join this organization. She wanted them to sign the Geneva Treaty. This treaty was a promise by all countries who signed it, and the promise was that during war, doctors and nurses could take care of the sick and wounded soldiers no matter what country they came from. It was not easy, but she finally convinced the lawmakers in 1882 to have the United States adopt and become a member of the International Association of the Red Cross. But she didn't stop there. She had a bigger idea. Why should the Red Cross only help people during wars? Why not use the Red Cross to help people in all kinds of disasters, from forest fires to floods and to earthquakes? Clara became the president of the American Red Cross for the first 23 years of its existence, and she continued to be a worker until she was 83 years old. So, the next time that you take a Red Cross swimming class or take a Red Cross first aid course, or you read about the Red Cross coming to the rescue in a disaster, remember who? Clara Barton. She was shy, but a very brave young Universalist girl who grew up to be a woman who started the American Red Cross. And the picture, I think, down here shows a picture. We have a stained glass window downstairs dedicated to women leaders in our Universalist and Unitarian traditions, and she is honored. I think she's the top picture there, which I take great pride in showing people who are visiting. So with that, I'm going to invite you to sing Stay Here in Peace as you stay in your chairs as we move into our time for joys and sorrows. So now is the time in our service when we hold up joys and sorrows that make up the very fabric of our lives. We share these joys and sorrow with our beloved community, so the excitement and the joy that we feel we don't have to just hold for ourselves, and the sorrows and the heaviness we can share so our burdens are a little less. So if you have a joy or a sorrow this morning that you wish to share with our beloved community, if you're online, you can start chatting or typing that into the chat, and Phyllis will read that joy or sorrow. And if you're here in the sanctuary, as Catherine is modeling for us right now, we're forming a queue line to be able to do that here in person. Before we get started, I want to share both a joy and a sorrow. This last week, we announced that Molly J. Webster, our beloved music director for, I believe, the last 5 years or so, is not going to be continuing on next year. Her career path is taking some different directions, and as I think many people have been aware, that she has had maybe a little bit too much on her plate for a while, and she, after some really deep soul searching, decided that this was probably one of a couple things that she has let go of. She's still going to be in the area and still conducting some of the community choirs and things like that. So it's a sadness that she will not be with us next year. And there's a feeling of, I feel kind of vicarious joy to know that she is not so overburdened and that she can continue to grow and become the best professional musician that she can be. Yeah, I'm excited for her, and I hope that she will continue to be a guest here. So in honor of Veterans Day, I light one candle for all the veterans, all the people who have served our country. I don't know if my thing is on here. There we go. For all veterans and for all people who have served our country to protect the way of life, the privileges, and the freedoms that we have and sometimes take for granted. And finally, I light one last candle for all the joys and sorrows that remain unexpressed within the deep recesses of our hearts and those that are ever present just below the surface. May they find hope, love, and connection, and may they find a nonviolent release. Please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. Great Universal Spirit, interconnected web of which we are a part, we gather in this sacred space with these beloved people, this wonderful community, to hold up the joys and sorrows that are part of our everyday lives. Today we hold in our hearts those who have passed away in the last week, for those who have had injuries or are infirm, who are struggling with illness, be it physical or mental. May they find the support and the love and care that they need to work through their ailments. In Spirit, we hold with great joy graduations and the many long anniversary celebrations that are happening at this time, and for our young people, the nearing the end of school. Spirit, we also hold in our hearts those around the world who are in areas of conflict and pray for their safe deliverance, and pray that the people who are involved in the conflicts continue to work towards and expediently find peaceful ways to end those conflicts, or at least to start working through them that do not involve violence and harm. Spirit, we gather in this time and place because we know that each life tells an important story, and each life holds a deep and abiding truth. By coming together in this time and this space, let us be reminded that we hold each other, we belong to each other, and that in caring for each other and hearing our stories, we become one. Blessed be. Amen.
All the springs of compassion blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Whose hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Now is the time in our service when we give our financial appreciation by contributing to the plates that will be passed. This is the end of the month of May, where we have been also accepting undesignated cash for the plate offerings for the Partners for Peace, which is the Penobscot and Piscataquis County Ending the Domestic Violence Program. So please give as your heart allows.
Receive this morning's offering to support this beloved community and Partners for Peace. Blessed be.
Prayer for Memorial Day by Reverend Wayne Aronson. Spirit of life, we enter into this season of Memorial Day surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses. We remember, first of all, the women and men who are currently serving in the armed forces, and we pray for their safe return. We also acknowledge that there are women and men who will not return, as we grieve their passing in the daily paper. We pause to honor their service and their sacrifice. We also pause this hour to give thanks for all the women and men who have served in the nation's armed services. Those who have not served cannot fully imagine the experience of war, but we do know war's aftermath and the toll it can take on the human heart. This day remembers and acknowledges loss, and so do we remember those whom we have loved and lost. We hold their names and their faces in our mind's eye. We recall the gifts they gave to us through the strength of their being, the depth of their love, the courage of their dying, and the fullness of their living. In the holy quiet of this hour, their names surround us, and they live with us in blessed memory. May we remain together in silence as a tribute to all that they have meant to us. Amen, and blessed be.
see, get that. Yep, we got sound. Lovely. A little more guitar if we can. You might have called it a summer of freedom, the year we both turned 18. Fresh out of high school, we hitchhiked to Denver. Man, we were a sight to be seen. That was the year that you dated my cousin, for they took us away in the fall. God, how I wish you were standing beside me as I touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. God help us all. Touch your name on the wall. Whenever I come here, I wear my fatigues to show respect for these women and men. I touch each name of everyone in my outfit, and I read their names out loud when I do. Some say that they all up and died for nothing, but you know I could never agree. 'Cause this fellow here didn't die for no country. He died for me. Touch a name on the wall. Touch a name on the wall. And God help us all. Touch a name on the wall. Usually walls are made for division. They keep me away from you. But God bless the wall that brings us together and reminds us of what we've been through. And God damn the liars and the tin-plated heroes who live off the blood of these women and men. Give us the strength to stand up against them and sing. Never again touch a name on the wall. Sing it with me. Touch a name on the wall. And God help us all. Touch a name on the wall one more time. Touch a name on the wall. Touch a name on the wall. And God help us all. Touch a name on the wall. So many years ago, when I was in my 20s, I found myself at a peace rally. The rally was organized by several Detroit area peace groups who were responding to our country's entry into the war in Iraq. There were several people attending a workshop on how to support military personnel who were trying to apply for conscientious objector status as their units were being called and deployed to Iraq. After a morning of workshops, the conference was called back into a large plenary session where the group reported out some of the highlights of what they had learned that morning and what steps of action they were taking. There was a general discussion about the Gulf War and how we could best pull our resources together in an anti-war effort. After each group made its statement, we moved into the larger general discussion, and as our discussion was happening, I became aware of two gentlemen who were wearing their dress uniforms and carrying an American flag on their flagpole, the type that you might see at a high school auditorium. The moderator of the gathering was continually kind of looking at them with a little suspicion, but never called on them to speak. In my mind, it was odd that someone should come to a peace rally dressed in a uniform, but something inside of me started to get kind of angry because these gentlemen had been trying to be recognized for something like 45 minutes, and everybody around them was getting called on, but not them. Everyone else who had wanted to speak had spoken at least once, and yet these soldiers continued to be ignored. Finally, I raised my hand and was recognized by the moderator, and I said, "I'm really uncomfortable here. We've been talking and you've been asking for people to speak, and I've noticed that these two gentlemen over here have had their hands up for over 45 minutes, and they have been not recognized. I don't know why they're here, but at least I want to hear what they have to say." There was tension in the room. One of the peace groups that I had been active with had been harassed at a candlelight vigil less than a week before by two people wearing uniforms and driving big pickup trucks and waving American flags. I think the moderator might have assumed that anyone who would show up for a peace rally in a uniform was there to cause trouble. But reluctantly, the moderator recognized these two veterans. For the next 20 minutes, these retired soldiers told us their story, how when they were young, they felt a strong call to serve their country, to give back for all the opportunity and prosperity that they had been given as young men. They were patriotic, and they were still but they said that the war had changed them. The enemy, they said, was not the North Koreans or the Vietnamese or the Iraqis. The real losers in war was all of humanity. They pointed out that the casualties of war are not just soldiers, but families and children, our communities, other people's communities, other countries, people who send anyone to fight, and people who are caught in the crossfire. For over 20 minutes, we listened passionately to these two soldiers and what they had to say. It was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. Their story was so compelling, they brought an embodied experience into what we all could only imagine on an intellectual basis. Their firsthand experience brought new meaning to our understanding. These two veterans had come from a group called Veterans for Peace. Something powerful happened to me that day as I realized that my stereotype that all military people were somehow pro-war was absolutely obliterated and shattered. Their stories brought me to a renewed sense of the commitment of working towards peace and offering support to those in the military who are having doubts about serving in Desert Storm. It was shortly after that that I first heard the words of this song, Touch a Name on the Wall, written by Joel Mabus. As I listened to this song with the images of those two veterans in mind, I thought of a trip that I had taken down to Washington, D.C. in high school shortly after the Vietnam Memorial was open. I remember the intense impression of that monument and the impression that it made on me. Touching that warm granite wall, feeling the names carved in its highly polished surface. I remember how spooky it was to read the names and at the same time see my own reflection on the wall's surface, like a ghost. A spirit was there looking back at me saying, part of you is here, and part of the cost and privileges that you enjoy and take for granted every day were paid for by the commitment and lives of these people, whether you like it or not. These experiences changed me. Before, I thought Memorial Day was just another civic holiday designed to boost patriotism and glorify war. I suppose that for some people that is what Memorial Day still means. But for me, I now saw Memorial Day as a day of mourning, sadness, and as a time to remember the debt that we owe and the need to continue working to change the world so that we don't have to count our privileges in terms of needless destruction of precious human life. Originally, Memorial Day was created right after the Civil War as a day of remembrance for the over 620,000 soldiers who lost their lives. That does not include the nearly 230,000 other people who died of disease or malnutrition. Families lost fathers, mothers, and children as that war indiscriminately took a toll. For the survivors, the horror of war was close up and personal. Everyone knew someone who had been lost or displaced, even families who had people fighting on both sides. War touches each and every one of our lives too. In Desert Storm, our media and technology was such that we were able to kind of sanitize and clean things up so that we were not troubled in our daily lives by the effect that it had. The president at the time prevented media from showing the caskets that were coming back from Iraq. Today, thanks to social media, even when countries try to sanitize the war, we are a little bit more clear on what's going on, at least in some of the conflicts around the world. In Gaza and Ukraine and Myanmar, we hear more about the horrors of war. And yet, it is estimated that there are over 700 other armed conflicts going on around the world that we hear very little about. According to the United Nations, there are more armed conflicts happening around the world now than at any time since World War II. Occasionally we hear stories of soldiers returning to their families, but we don't hear enough about the extended casualties of war, of people's lives that are destroyed by mental illness, PTSD, loss of function in their bodies, and ongoing health issues. How even women and men returning from combat with their lives intact still are deeply affected by the experience and often struggle to make sense of the meaning of it all. That is why I believe that we need holidays like Memorial Day, a time to remember those people who have given of their lives and those who continue to give of themselves for freedom and democracy, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am not only talking about those people who served in the armed services, I am also talking about all those people who serve our veterans, including people like Clara Barton, doctors, nurses, mental health workers, and even those who have served as conscientious objectors, both in combat positions as medics and those who performed alternate service in caring for service members when they returned back home. I'm also talking about people who work as Peace Corps volunteers, who have worked to build relationships to prevent war, and diplomats who have worked for nonviolent solutions to conflicts around the world. We need holidays like Memorial Day to remind us of those who have gone before, but also to remind us that it's not people who are the enemy, but war that is the enemy of all people. We need to find a way to break ourselves of a reliance on war as a means of settling disputes. We need Memorial Day to remind us that there is still a goal of nonviolent conflict resolution out there, elusive as it may be. But until we find those alternative solutions and learn to practice them effectively, we need to remember the cost of war and to give our gratitude to those who have given their lives so that the rights and privileges that we have can continue to be enjoyed. Let us mourn our veterans and remind ourselves that we still have work to do until we reach that day when we celebrate memorials, or no longer celebrate memorials to the success of violence, but memorials to the successful nonviolent resolutions of conflicts, instead of memorials to dead and fallen heroes and heroines. Blessed be. Amen. I invite you now to sing our closing hymn, 360, Here We Have Gathered. As we extinguish our Unitarian Universalist chalice flame, symbol of faith, hope, love, and connection, let us be reminded that although our time of worship has come to an end, our service to the world and to each other has just begun. Blessed be. Paul, I'm going to have you blow our candle out. Thank you. you. I now invite you all to rise in body or in spirit for our benediction. Everybody turn and wave to our folks on Zoom so they know that we care about them too. Thank you.